Ayawanji. Nanjup Nurjini, Nanjun Warking. Hello and welcome. I'm happy to see you all here this morning. Also happy to be speaking with you this morning. My name is Nick Abraham and my family connections are Abraham, Benel, Humphrey, Hume, Mippy, Worrell, Nettle, Harris. And we're connected to many parts of Noongar country. Wajak, which is the Budja we're sitting and standing on here today. But also connected to Ewart, which is to the north of Wajak. Also connected to Ballalong, which is to the east of Wajak. To Wilman, which is to the southeast of Wajak. Also connected to Bingerup, which is to the south of Wajak. And Wadani, which is to the south of Bingerup. I must also take this opportunity to acknowledge my Kura Martin Williams, my wife and in-laws, Boltons and Woods. And they're also connected into Wilman, which is southeast of Wajak. Canang, which is south of Wilman. Goring, which is southeast of Canang. And Menang, which is south of Goring, which goes all the way down to Albany. I must also take this opportunity to acknowledge the other parts of the Noongar Nation. Ammangu, which is north of Ewart. Nagi, which is east of Ballalong. Wiradjuri, which is east of Wilman. Nunga, which is south-southeast of Goring, which goes all the way down towards Esperance. And Bibbulmun, which is further down south. However, Bibbulmun has a flow throughout Noongar country, and you may hear Noongar people talk interchangeably between Bibbulmun and Noongar. That's because of the ancient and still current connection. So Niji Noongar Budja, Niji Noongar Warnking. This is Noongar country, this is a Noongar language that I'm speaking. Korona Kubagna, Noongar Moor, Noongar Redia, Korona Jordishwarjini, Norajini. So I'm just acknowledging the ancient land and the ancient language, but also acknowledging my elders past, present and emerging, but also acknowledging each and every one of you of being here today. Being here today to give me a bit of an opportunity to tell about the history of this country that you may or may not be aware of. Now the story I tell you about goes back at least 65 plus thousands of years. However, I've only got a few minutes to tell you that story. So hopefully you would walk with me on this journey. And the story I'm going to tell you about is not about blame. It is not about shame. It is about understanding of the country, the Budja that we're sitting and standing on here today. And to do that, I've got to bring you into this space. I've got to bring you into this space by asking you three personal questions. Now, because they're personal questions, nobody else needs to know the answer other than Budja, country, and world of sky. So when you answer these questions, you answer them as loud as you can in your head. Budja will hear you, and world will hear you, but nobody else. Do we understand? So the first question, as loud as you can in your head, just let the Budja and the world know your name. Are we all good with that one? Lovely, that's better. Next question, just let the Budja and the world know who's your family and where you're from. You may have connections here, you may have connections to other parts of WA, other parts of Australia, even other parts of the world. Just let the Budja and the world know who's your mob and where you're from. And depending how much you know your extended family, that may take a while, so I'm going to leave you with that. Now the third question, the answer to the third question can only come from your core, your heart, and only you can answer this question. And that question is, what's important to you? And I'm going to leave you with that while I take you on this journey. So when Noongar people were given our knowledge through the oral tradition, as passed down from our grandmothers, grandfathers, mums, dads, and Noongar bosses from long, long ago. And when they're telling us these ancient stories, they're usually telling these stories around the campfire. And when they're telling us these stories, they're telling us something very, very deep that we don't understand when we're very young. And we don't understand it until we get a bit more mature. And when we understand it, this is what they're telling us from my understanding. What they're telling us is, Miril, use your eyes to see. Use your ears to listen. Courage. Use your head and your heart to understand. Understand these stories we're telling you about your country, your culture, your people, your values, responsibilities and purpose. And they break it up in a couple of key little elements that hopefully will help you understand. And the very first thing they teach us about is our moral. Our moral is family. Mum, dad, nan, pop, uncle, aunties, brothers, sisters. All the extended families and the different levels of relationships and responsibilities to each and every one of those, including the Kura Martin and Williams, the wife and in-laws, because they're a very important part of our social fabric. But that was also one of our laws of who we could and couldn't marry. We couldn't marry close bloodlines. We had to keep our genetic strong. And we have a system in place that's still functioning today of how we to maintain our long, strong eugenics. Next, the old fellows taught us about our culture. What is culture? I'm going to give you a few definitions of what I think culture is. You may agree and you may even add your own. For me, culture is about values. Culture is also about language. And through that language, it gives you your identity, your belonging, your beliefs and your spirituality. So if you think about that, language, identity, belonging, belief, spirituality, there could be a modern word or two for that, faith or religion. So Nyunga, like many Indigenous cultures all around Australia and the world, have our own form of faith or religion through our culture. Next, the old fellows taught us about our Cardigan. Now, Cardigan's our knowledge system where the old people understood and knew the relationship between the sun, the stars, the moon, the plants, the animals, the waterways and the seasons, and how we live sustainably in those environments. Now, if anybody want to learn about the sun and the stars and the moon and the plants and the animals today, they have to go to a place like Curtin University to learn about science. My old people have that knowledge of how we looked after this land for many, many generations under that Cardigan. Next, the old fellows taught us about our core when. What is the art? When is the spirit? Bringing them together, it's our well-being. And our old people taught us about our foods, our medicines, our sites, our ceremonies, our social interactions, responsibilities and purpose, and our homes. And they knew when we were out of balance physically and emotionally how to connect in with all the other different systems, bring us back into balance. And that was our health system. And the old people taught us that these key elements are connected to our budja, our land, because they knew if we look after country, country would look after us. This one represents our British, our elders, because it was their responsibility of overlooking the system and making sure that our laws and the customs are never broken. And that system was functioning for many thousands of generations, where the sun would always rise in the east and set in the west. The moon would eventually rise in the east and set in the west. And when our people pass and they leave this place, they go to the next part of the dreaming, a place called Karrinyup, which is over the west where the sun sets. And the only time that ever return is in our dreams and in some consciousness to give us guidance in support of maintaining our laws and customs. So for many thousands of generations, on this part of Nyunga country, which is to the east and southeast of the river, the Derbyurigan, was a Bilu country. And this extends all the way up to the next major river, up to the north, which is the Mundoon Bilya, that people may know as the Helena River. And to the south, Jogarabilya, which is people may know as the Canning River, and all the way up into the hills. On the other side of the river, going to the north, was the Muru people. And that land extends all the way up to the ocean and all the way up to the next major river, which is now we know as the Moore River. And the Muru people used to live on that side of country. And something strange happened in the early 1800s. Some people came down the Derbyurigan, this one river. And as they came across to where the Muru people were usually camping over there near Kings Park, Elizabeth Quay and Government House. And Yalagonga was the leader at the time when these strange people came. And when these people came, the Muru people couldn't make sense of who they were because they were pale, they looked different, they spoke different, and they behaved differently. But they came from that way. So Yalagonga, the Muru's people, only conclusion is if they came from that way and they are pale, they must be our younger ancestor spirits people returning. What do? We understand where they come in our dreams and our subconsciousness, but here they were in physical form. So Yalagonga, the Muru people, done the only thing that they thought was humanly possible for them. If these are our younger ancestors, spirits people returning, they look tired, they look worn, and they look weathered. So we must look after them. So what the Muru people have done is given up their camp all the way along the base of Kings Park, Elizabeth Quay, and Government House, and they moved to another camp that we know as Lake Munga, which is originally Gullup. And as they moved over there, they left the younger ancestor spirits along the banks of the river there to rest, recover, and return. They rested, they recovered. Did they return? No, they stayed. They stayed and they saw this system and they ignored this system and imposed new laws and customs on this land. And immediately, everything that was important to us all of a sudden was illegal and outlawed. And immediately, we had disruptions to our British and our elders and our governance system. We had disruptions to our Moore and our families. We had disruption to our culture and our language. We had disruption to our knowledge system, the way we looked after this land. All of a sudden, we had no say in how our land was being divvied up. And we had disruption to our court and our health system because we couldn't get access to our sites for our foods, our medicines, our ceremonies, our social interaction responsibilities and purposes, and our homes. Because all of a sudden, we were trespassing on Crown land and private property. And these key things disconnected us from our budget. And that's where my community is today, picking up the pieces of this disconnection and this disruption. Now, this disconnection and disruption has been labelled colonisation. I just want to acknowledge that colonisation happened in many parts of the world long before it arrived here and long after it arrived here. In fact, it's happening in the world today. And you only have to look at the morning and evening news to see what's happening in other parts of the world. But I can only talk about the impacts colonisation had on my country, culture, people, values, responsibilities and purpose. Despite all this recent disruption, my people's spirits are still here. Despite all this recent disruption, our spirit stories are still here. Despite all this recent disruption, we are still here. Throughout this disruption, many others have come and many others have visited. and my ancestors will be angry with me if I do not tell the real history of this country that many Western Australians may or may not be aware of. I just want to say, Mum and Jinanalaya, Bonaranjini, just let the good spirits look after you and keep you safe while you're here in your own country. But also to help you to open your eyes, your ears, your head and your heart to understand and appreciate what was and what is. And we're in the 21st century, and my people are still living in hope of what could be. Of what could be, we're still living in hope. Because we all have a commonality that we all share, that sometimes it gets lost in this modern day world. Because we've been challenged over many, many generations, politically, economically, with social division, technology, and environmental issues. But we all have one commonality that we all share. We're all human. We're all part of humanity. And my people are still living in hope that we can walk on that journey together for a better world for not only my great-great-grandchildren, but also yours and many others to come along in the future. So Mama Jinanay, let the good spirits look after you and keep you safe. And I look forward to seeing you in the very near future. And for now, I'll hand you over to Emmeline to take us through today's proceedings. So thank you and have a beautiful day.
Thank you, Nick, for that welcome to ground us here in this place at this time. And as we extend a welcome to all of you, whether you've just come across the road, whether you've come back as an old friend, or whether it's the first time that you come here today. I'll just wait for the laptop to wake up. So I'll be running through a few housekeeping things today, and then we'll be passing on to Stephen. So the first thing is that there will be photography throughout this event, mostly on Friday. If you do wish not to be photographed, please come speak with one of the organizing committee. The Wi-Fi, you should have access through the CSIRO's login. If you have any issues with that, you can talk to the front desk, but you should get a text message when you've signed in. If you hear any signs of an emergency, please follow the prompts. The muster point is out the front in the car park. There are toilets as you enter the building to the left. There is a kitchen across from this auditorium as well, and there's a place to fill up water bottles just outside the door. For food service, we'll be doing morning tea and afternoon tea in the fishbowl, which is right across from the toilets at the front of the left of the building as well. But lunch will be served at the cafe at the very top of the ramp. So that is all from those sort of essential points of view. So for today, we'll have the housekeeping, Stephen, and morning tea after that. But just a little note that this is also being recorded. And we are here to help you if you have any issues throughout the whole session. The organizing committee is wearing yellow lanyards, so just come and find one of us. A quick note that on Friday, we will have a sundowner for the launch of phase 3. You should all be aware of this already through various communications. And we'll put this link up again so that you can find maps of locations. But again, please ask us if you have any questions. I'll now pass on to Stephen for his session.
Thanks very much, Emmeline. And although Nick's left, I want to express my gratitude to him for a fantastic welcome to country and a pretty amazing insight into that perspective on where we're meeting and whose land we're privileged to meet on. So welcome, everyone. I'll be giving I think quite a brief director's update. Welcome to everyone who's come in, as Emmeline says, from across the road, up the corridor, or from interstate or overseas. Great to see so many people in the room and a very large number of people online as well. So welcome to everyone online. I just want to spend a moment to acknowledge country, but not Noongar country. Nick's done an amazing job of that. but I do like to acknowledge the fact that the MWA project is privileged to be undertaken on Wadjuri Yamaji land, which is to the north of where we are, sort of 800 kilometres or so to the north, and where we build our telescopes and where we're privileged to explore the universe from. So I acknowledge both country, and I acknowledge many of our good friends and partners in the Indigenous communities around that region, particularly around Geraldton. And for those of you who are maybe new to the project, we're always bringing new people into the project. So just for very, very high level awareness, this is a map of Australia, or what we call Australia. But this is a map that represents the different language groups of the Indigenous communities around the landmass. The small circle around Perth is representing Noongar Budja, and Nick did an amazing job, I think, of pointing out that within the Noongar group there are many subgroups and language groups. And then the circle to the north is Yamaji country, and in particular towards the south of that region is Wadjuri Yamaji country, which is where in Yarrimara, Ilguri Bundara, the CSIRO Radio Astronomy Observatory is located, and that's where the Murchison Wide Field Array is located. So just to put where we are as a project into context, and to acknowledge the traditional owners of that land. Most of you, I think, will be well familiar with the context. But again, for anyone who's new to the project, I like this slide because it represents many things about the project, including some of the challenges of building and operating telescopes in that part of the world. So the white outline there is Murchison Shire. It's the only shire in the country that does not have a gazetted town. It's an area of about 41,000 square kilometres, which is about the same as the country of the Netherlands, and has a population of order 100 or 200 people, depending on the day and depending on whether you're building the SKA or not. So that's a population density of 2 million people per square kilometre. And of course, that's where we need to build radio telescopes to be well away from sources of radio frequency interference, although that's getting more and more difficult even in these locations. So that's where we are, and the red line is probably a fairly poor representation of the optical fibre route that brings all of our data from the telescope down to Perth, where the fibre ends up, both at Curtin University and also at the Pawsey Centre, where all of our data are deposited. So that's local, but of course you all know that the MWA is inherently international project, and inherently a project that has grown up as a grassroots enterprise from its earliest days. A group of people and countries and organisations that were originally, and I think still are, focused on building and operating telescopes with the purpose to perform particular experiments. That's still expressed in the international partnership of countries that we have involved: Australia, Canada, China, Japan, Switzerland, and the US, and all of the partner organisations in those countries. Your computer's about to restart. Don't try not to do that. I inevitably miss someone on this slide and get yelled at, so if I've missed you, please yell at me. I don't think I have. I don't know, maybe I just feel nostalgic. Everyone's seen this many, many, many times, but for those who are new, this is one close-up view of the telescope in the environment of the Murchison on Wadjuri Yamaji country, and I never ceased to be impressed by the juxtaposition of a simple, elegant, powerful telescope nestled into the environment of the red dirt and flat landscape of the Murchison, and think about the landscape and the history and the people and the culture, but then also what we're doing, attempting to discover the secrets of the universe. That's always been something that's been really, really special to me, and something I think is quite unique about the MWA project. Anyway, enough of nostalgia. I guess one of the significant purposes for being back in Perth this year, I do appreciate the fact that we all gathered in Perth 2 years ago, I think it was, for the 10-year anniversary, and I do appreciate that Perth's a long way for most people to come, so yeah, I do appreciate the fact that so many people have been able to travel again to join us. But the motivation for doing that is the fact that we've reached a pretty significant milestone for the MWA project, and that's the completion of the Phase 3 upgrade and the commencement of operations using that upgraded facility. So I'm going to leave all the impressive details of the ins and outs of what the upgrade entails and what's been done, and the enormous body of work that's been conducted by a large number of people, to the people who've done the work, and those presentations will follow, and I'm really excited to listen to them. But I just wanted to give a little bit of context, probably at the highest level, and just chart out on one slide the history of the project, from not the early history, but from the point at which we coalesced a plan to actually build something and deliver a project on the ground that became known as Phase 1. That was the initial scope of the project, and composed of 128 tiles and 16 receivers. But cleverly, I think, instead of pouring all of our money into building that, squeezing out N+1 tiles, we actually reserved a significant amount of money from putting tiles on the ground, and elected to establish the infrastructure to support ultimately 256 tiles, anticipating the success of the instrument that was realised, and perhaps a future opportunity to go through some upgrade activities. That did in fact then take place in the form of Phase 2. These year dates are a bit loose. There's no hard and fast boundary really between these phases, and some elements of the different upgrades have sort of come in gradually, and others have come in abruptly, so that the years are just simply a guide. The dollars are also a little bit of a guide, but are there to sort of illustrate that fairly significant initial build cost, at least in 2007 dollars, then enabled pretty modestly priced upgrades that were very, very effective. First of those being Phase 2, utilised that infrastructure that had been developed, and at pretty low cost, then established 256 tiles on the site. However, only still supported by 16 receivers. So Phase 2, we entered a phase of, I would say, our heaviest operations, because 256 tiles and 16 receivers entailed physical reconfigurations between two arrays that we utilised: a compact array, 128 short baseline tiles, and 128 extended baseline tiles. So we did something that you really probably shouldn't, and that is truck the receivers around the site, plonking them down in different locations and plugging them back in. And honestly, it's an eternal miracle to me that those original 16 receivers, they're a bit worse for wear now, I think it's fair to say, but it's absolutely astonishing and testament to the skill and perseverance of the team, that some of those are even still in one piece. They were fielded in 2012, and those of you who were around at the time witnessed the development of those receivers. I don't know what secret sauce is in there, but the fact that some of them are still operating to me is astonishing. But anyway, that phase 2 proceeded on that basis, and those two configuration of tiles served quite different purposes and enabled quite different capabilities. I guess almost immediately, having realised the guts of phase 2, we started turning our minds, roughly speaking, to a phase 3, although it took a long time, I think, to sort of coalesce as a scope and to think through just what the feasibility and financing would look like. So phase 3 proceeded on a few different fronts, and I would say in more of a creeping manner compared to phase 1 and phase 2. But phase 3 is what we embark upon today, and the scope of that has been incremented. So we still have 256 tiles, but we now have 34, I think is the correct number, receivers, and that's composed of the 16 original receivers that are colloquially known as RRI receivers, because much of the work was done out of the Raman Research Institute in India, but actually there were many more contributions beyond that, but we know them as the RRI receivers, and they're the receivers I refer to as being astonishingly still operational, largely speaking. But the big increment was 16 new receivers, now colloquially known as the Xiao receivers, built and provided by the Shanghai Astronomical Observatory. But like the RRI receivers, there were, beyond the valued contribution of our colleagues at Xiao, many contributions in the co-design, testing and verification of those receivers. But we know them as the Xiao receivers. And there's a couple of floating receivers that we call the NI receivers, simply because they're composed of commercial off-the-shelf kit bought from National Instruments. So that represents a set of receivers that's now matched to 256 tiles, so that we can operate the full array as one, and no further need, I think, to physically regularly reconfigure receivers, although there might be a little bit of shuffling around to optimize various things over time. But we move away from a mode of operations where physical reconfigurations are required. The other big and fundamentally enabling component of phase 3, which came along actually a couple of years ago, or a few years ago, was the upgraded correlator known as MWAX. So from the outset, the MWA has operated with a software correlator based on GPU technologies. That first correlator worked for a 10-year period, which is in itself pretty impressive for a cluster of computers built around GPUs. Those GPUs were pretty old by the time that they were decommissioned, and MWAX was an upgraded version of that with the latest and greatest at the time GPUs. And so that was implemented, I think, around 2022 in its initial form, and the nature of software correlation is such that you can pretty flexibly upgrade the capabilities of such a subsystem fairly readily, and that correlator has been embellished since then in a few different ways. It's worth pointing out that, well, so that correlator obviously services a full 256 tile facility. It's worth pointing out in the receiver side of things, a pretty fundamental change to the way that the new receivers are distinguished from the old receivers, in that the SHAO and NI receivers can operate in an oversampled mode, such that hopefully we can eliminate or virtually eliminate the coarse channel boundary effects that primarily are a significant issue for the epoch of reionization experiment. So that's a pretty good increment on the capability of the overall system, and in particular for that extraordinarily important experiment for the EOR. Those receivers obviously can also mimic the same mode that the RRI receivers operate in, which is a critically sampled mode. So that's a pretty high-level description of a system that's become a lot more capable. And in doing that, I'm glossing over so many upgrade elements and improvements to the software and the monitor and control and how the correlator works. But we'll hear about, I think, some of those details as we move through the program this week. But I just want to make clear that there's much more under the hood than just the headline indicates. So I can't just have words in my talk. I do need a few pictures. You'll see more and better pictures, I'm sure, in subsequent talks. But okay, that's MWAX. It's computers. We've all seen computers. That's not dismissive. That's actually a massive compliment. The adoption of standard commercial off-the-shelf technologies and hardware, I think, has also been a pretty strong feature of the MWA's development path. And so boring, reliable, robust, replaceable, flexible, they're all brilliant attributes as far as I'm concerned. So do love a boring computer. A bit more bespoke, the new receivers, although under the hood, built on pretty standard componentry. The top right is, it's a box with some receiver electronics in it. That's the SHAO receiver in the rack mountable form that's been developed. The development of these receivers was really a pretty significant co-design activity between Shanghai Astronomical Observatory and the MWA engineering and operations team. These receivers had their genesis at a meeting in China in 2019, when we had just the first discussion about, we need a new receiver system. How can we achieve that? And from that grew an effort to methodically co-design the concept and co-design the architecture requirements between the two teams, and then ultimately produce some prototypes, test them, go through that cycle pretty methodically. So, that's a 5 or 6 year process now. And the product at the end of that is, I would say, exceptionally good. All of this kit needs to be housed and appropriately deployed into the pretty harsh environment at times in the Murchison, and also have to be deployed in a manner that is free from allowing interfering radiation out into the environment. Very, very strict controls about that. So on the bottom right is the environmental enclosure that the receivers sit in, and I'm sure Andy will tell us a lot more about the environmental enclosures. They're a bit of a beast, but they need to be. And all of the electronics obviously needs to go through very comprehensive electromagnetic compatibility testing in order to make sure that we meet the stringent requirements of operating at the site. So I'm sure you'll hear more about each of those things and see some better images and descriptions of how it all works. So charting the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 sort of upgrades have really charted a path to evolving capabilities. And phase 1 was 128 tiles, and so that's a large N interferometer, which allowed the team to define a really nice tile distribution, giving really great UV coverages over a bunch of different science use cases. And the GPU-based correlator, adopting that was a bit of a game changer for bringing in flexible development. I don't really like to dwell and think about what the world might have been like if we had stuck with the standard FPGA-based correlator. I suspect we would have experienced a world of pain. But thanks to some forward-looking insights from members of the team, and I didn't take much convincing, getting on the path of GPU-based software correlation was a huge win. Phase 2, having both compact and extended arrays with the sensitivity of 128 tiles, really extended our capabilities, and in particular for the EOR and pulsars using the compact array, but with the higher angular resolution array for projects like GleamX, which is pretty close to fully coming out now. And then off the back of things like that, pretty significant discoveries in areas like transients. So the capability increment from phase 1 to phase 2 is pretty significant. And then, yeah, it's really impressive to see what's been enabled through the adoption of the phase 3 approach, and having all 256 tiles available. And operations team, it is on my bucket list to see at least one observation of all 256 tiles before I depart this earth. So fair warning, that is your mission, and we're so close, Andy. 235, is it? Yeah.
It's 200 above.
Yeah, they're always hosing me down. That's fine. So yeah, being released from physical reconfigurations is a bit of a game changer. And what's come along, at least for me, reasonably surprisingly quickly, is the ability to switch configurations almost, I won't say at will, but certainly in a hands-off manner, and enabled by software, such that we can now offer a range of different configurations that are pretty closely tailored to not just science cases, but how much data you're prepared to deal with, and whether you want oversampled or critically sampled. So when we sat down to think through what we would offer as initial phase 3 capabilities, we do tend to always be pretty conservative in how we release modes of operation and capabilities, and progressively over time more fully utilize the flexibility and the latent capabilities. But even with that conservative approach, we've ended up with a page full of array configurations that we're happy to support. And of course, that's all supported by the flexibility of MWAs and enormous myriad of major and minor software improvements under the hood. So you can really see, I think, an evolution and a maturing of the capabilities of the telescope. And those capabilities follow and match the scientific ambitions of the consortium. So I think that's a really nice story. On the very back end of the system, of course, you need somewhere to put your data. And we've had an extraordinarily productive and long-running partnership with the Pawsey Centre, which is just over the back here, which is where all of our data end up in an archive and made available to all of you and users around the world. Currently the archive, I think, consists of around about 50 petabytes of data of order. We're making a really big concerted effort to actively delete from that archive low value data, low quality data, in order to make room for phase 3 new data sets that are going to come along soon. So the operations team's been working hard on that. We've diversified our compute portfolio, I would say. So there's now a significant amount of data processing done at a company called Doug Technology, which is a global company but headquartered out of here in Perth. There's plenty of data processing at Doug. And we're also working with the Swiss National Supercomputing Centre, CSCS, in Lugano in Switzerland to progress various different elements of MWA data processing, porting of code, algorithm development, etc. So yes, on the end of big capable telescopes, you do need big computers. They're probably not what I'd call boring computers. They're quite fancy computers. In order to utilise all of that, the operations team has done a stunning job over a long period of time to implement interfaces to the archive in the form of the MWA All Sky Virtual Observatory portal, and all of the tools and APIs and everything beyond that allow you as users to access data, but not just access, apply some level of data processing before the data get to you. So again, this is a stunningly successful element of the MWA system, and it's at the pointy end of the actual interface with the users. And I'm continuously impressed at the work of the team in making sure that's all working and subject to whatever constraints and dependencies that are out of our control, making it as available as possible to all of our users. So that's a really quick run through. It's really satisfying to sort of be here at the end of quite an extended development phase for phase 3, and to be in the position where the telescope is now on sky, and the capability's been bed in. It's never the case that you turn a telescope on day 1 or turn on an upgraded telescope on day N and everything's just working perfectly out of the box. The team's chasing down some increasingly minor issues and doing a really good job of tidying a few things up, and the entire system is bedding down very nicely, I think, from what's in the field to what's in the data archive. So the number one thing for me now is to look forward to the period of operations that's ahead of us. We had a really strong response to the last call for proposals, which was the first call for the phase 3 system. I forget what the exact numbers were, but from memory, I think we were like a factor of 3 more hours and data requested than the average for the last 2 or 3 years. So a real bump up in demand for the system, and really happily some new people coming along with new ideas for how to use the telescope, as well as all of the traditional big projects, and being able to commence that at this time of year means that we're going straight into EOR season and expecting to collect quite a lot of EOR data over the coming months. So that's great. Major MWA upgrade just completed after a 5-year development period. That's an enormous milestone for us. Semester 2025B underway and everything bedding in really nicely. But you never get to take a breath, actually, because the current funding horizon for the project, for the major component of operations funding, which is through a program called NCRIS here in Australia, is through mid-2027. So that's less than 2 years away now. And so we are currently starting to engage the funding agency that administers NCRIS funding for astronomy, which is Astronomy Australia Limited, engaging on the future of that funding post mid-2027. NCRIS funding comes in sort of, well, by default, sort of 5-year blocks from the Commonwealth Government of Australia. It's spread out over a bunch of different, what they call capabilities. One of those capabilities is astronomy, run by Astronomy Australia Limited, and AAL then decide on some prioritisation of things to fund. MWA has always been on that list, and we're continuously told that we're the star performer of the AAL portfolio, which is great. So the government needs to decide on the next 5-year block of funding. That funding needs to flow through capabilities. AAL need to figure out their prioritisation for the application of that funding, and that's where we engage. We need to start talking about what the funding for the MWA looks like from post mid-2027. In Australia, one of the really big inputs into that prioritisation is the decadal plan for Australian astronomy, which has just been wrapped up, and the document has been now released publicly. You can go and have a look at it. The MWA gets a very positive review in that decadal plan, which I think bodes well for having a positive discussion about funding, but all of that is yet to come. And then in the slightly longer term future, obviously SKA Low is coming along in construction, and so at some point the phase 3 science capabilities of the MWA will expect to reasonably mesh to the growing capabilities of SKA Low as that program goes ahead, and the various steps are taken to get into SKA Low operations. So that's where the discussion is now. We've got a discussion about more or less our immediate funding landscape, and then we have a slightly bigger discussion about how the MWA meshes into the coming along of SKA Low. In my mind, broadly speaking, that maximal meshing point is, I project to be around about the end of the SKA Low science verification period, which is 2030. So we should be having a think about what the MWA looks like come 2030, and how that meshes into SKA Low. So they're the things in front of us. It's not enough to successfully complete phase 3. You get a chance to pat yourself on the back, but then you've got to think about money for the next N-year period in the context of SKA. So that all of that future-facing context is under discussion by the MWA board, and we have some meaty agenda items on the board agenda for tomorrow to discuss these sorts of things. So that's it from me. Once again, big thanks to everyone for coming along. And you're going to hear a lot of great talks. We're going to have a chance to get together for a little bit of a celebration on Friday night. And for me, the realisation of phase 3 is it's all about the technology and the capabilities and the science and everything else. But what's been unique about phase 3 is the drawing upon of resources, I would say more broadly than we drew upon for phase 2. So for me, there's a real special component here about the broader team, and it's about the people who've delivered this, and it's about the international collaboration as well. So I want to celebrate that as much this week as the technology and the antennas and the computers. Just before I leave, massive thanks to the Scientific Organising Committee for the meeting, which is up here, and in particular and enormous. Thank you to the local organising committee of Emmeline, Kirsty, Aoife and Amber, who have delivered us all here today and really organised a great program for us. So happy to take a few questions, but I'll leave it at that for now. Thank you. Any questions from the floor or online? Christian.
Yeah, I'm interested to hear about the technologies and the software development and algorithms you are working with the CSCS team.
Yeah, I'm probably the wrong person to ask in detail. I sort of played a role brokering the relationship, but probably Dev is a much better person to talk about what might be on offer there. But I can try and relate what I know. They've set up what they call a V cluster. So CSCS, they don't call their facility a supercomputer. They call it a facility, I think, or something. And that facility can be flexibly configured to generate what they call virtual clusters, and that can have whatever combination of hardware that they're running. So my understanding is that they've set up a V cluster environment for the MWA that contains both NVIDIA and GPU and AMD GPUs that are going to help assist us with porting of various codes from what we've historically used in the form of NVIDIA GPUs into an equivalent for AMD GPUs, which is what Pawsey has adopted. So Dev can correct me if I've got that completely wrong. Dev has a login. I have a login. I think that's a bit useless, but yeah, follow up with Dev for details.
Cool, thanks.
Any other
Anyone else?
questions?
No, Ron, yeah.
Thank you, Steve. And as a representative of the community, thank you for this incredible contribution you have made both to national and international astronomy. And in case you don't know, this guy has played a major role right from the beginning.
What's your question?
You introduced me before, so I'm free to say that.
Fair.
The question is, for our future generations, we do worry about climate change, and observatories are perhaps the biggest carbon footprint of astronomers. In your long-term planning or the current progression, what are you doing to minimize the carbon footprint of telescopes like the MWA?
Yeah, that's a great question. So when you say observatories, I think it's proven now comprehensively that that's overwhelmingly dominated by the use of computing. So that the question is, what do you do to mitigate the impact of the power and water usage of your computers? So it's not something that we have directly under our control as an observatory. The MWA has been, and ASCAP as well, and actually most modern telescopes of scale have been exercises in pulling funding and resources from 25 different places in order to make an observatory. And one of the places we've pulled from is Pawsey, which is completely separately funded, completely out of our control, managed completely separately. So there are technology choices that you can make in order to minimize your carbon footprint, and most computing centers attempt this in one form or another. I cite the example of Doug Technology. They utilize fully immersed compute hardware in mineral oil, which turns out to be an extraordinarily efficient mechanism to cool hardware and also prolong the lifetime of hardware. So the input energy required to get an output calculation is absolutely minimized using technologies like that. So I think adoptions of technologies like that are what we have to do. We also have to have far more efficient codes. We're very, 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 very wasteful in how we develop and run codes. So they're two significant things, but I don't think that we're going to be able to prosecute the ability to do that until an observatory has full control over all of those elements and they're properly resourced. So to write great efficient code, you need a stable system, you need people who are incredibly expert in the systems, who interface to the science experts, and who are going to be on the scene for years and years and years to really understand the system. And then you need to have all of that computing under your authority so that you can make decisions about energy efficiency, so that you can make decisions about architectures that actually suit the telescope rather than just grabbing things from here and there to stitch together a system that's actually pretty terrible when you stop and think about it. So yeah, we do need to move to the concept of an observatory having control over every single element of its operations if we want to optimize them. And I think the SKA is a step in that direction, but not a complete step. So there's a few thoughts. Greg's better at this than I am.
Thanks for being right here next to me.
Yeah, everything that you said, Stephen, is correct, and I agree with all that. And just a couple of, I guess, concrete examples, Ron, is that when we designed the MWAX correlator, we had come from the design of the previous correlator, what we call now the legacy correlator, that was running 24/7, and it was a M&C command that actually would dump the data, but it was always correlating, even if we weren't observing. And the GPU cluster at the MRO is one of the biggest power users that we have, at least within the control building. So one of the things we decided to do with MWAX was to make sure that we only ever engage the GPUs and get data flowing if we're actually observing. And because most of the time our observing schedule means that we have anything from 30% to 70% time not observing, that is a huge power save just on that. So making small decisions in the design can really help reduce long-term power consumption. And I think just echoing what Stephen said as well, one of the really important things to do to minimize carbon footprint in a data-intensive astronomy situation is the use of GPUs. So you just cannot get more efficient flops per watt than GPU code. So the more code that we can actually run with GPUs and convert is going to help a lot. Some of the difficulties there is that some of the code that we rely on is not written by us. And so we either have to do our own or try in some way to encourage the authors to parallelize the code so it can work on GPUs.
At least we're not smashing the planet with AI yet. Okay. Thanks, Emily.
Thanks, Stephen. So before I release you for morning tea, just a reminder for any presenters for the upcoming sessions to make sure that you have provided us your slides or touch base with your session chair. So the morning tea is just out through the door to the left. I'm sure you'll see everyone heading over that way anyways. We'll be back in here to kick off at 11. So try and make your way back here just before that. Thanks.